Hello, thanks for joining us on the France 24 interview. And my guest today is Sarah Daniel. Sarah Daniel is an international correspondent who spent the last 10 years of her life writing about the world's major conflicts for the French weekly The Nouvel Observateur. She began her war reporting in Afghanistan in 2001, and since then she's covered countless other wars: Iraq, Pakistan, Lebanon, to name but a few. And she just wrote a new book recounting a decade of war reporting. She writes of losing her colleagues on the battlefield, appealing to Taliban commanders' sense of pride, or having tea with murderers. Sarah Daniel, thank you very much for joining me right here on the set of the France 24 interview. The first question that struck me as I read your book was, do you only enjoy war? Is there nothing else you like to cover? Or were you just laden with a part of the world where there's nothing but war? What happened?
Yes, no, not at all. I'm just interested in, the situation and explaining the geopolitics of the area. And it happens that in the Middle East, there are conflicts all the time. So I'm, it's happening like that. But it's not that I enjoy, seeing people dying and intense situations.
So your first assignment of war reporting, your first war assignment, happened in 2001, where you were sent to cover the war in Afghanistan and the imminent attack by the United States. You describe losing your colleagues, other journalists who were killed during that assignment, and you describe the fear. And you say that during the years after that, the fear didn't leave you. You just learned to deal with it. So why do you continue to do a job that involves being afraid on a daily basis?
Yes, for me, it was a very intense assignment. It was my first war assignment. And once you reached Afghanistan, you couldn't withdraw. You were stuck there. And of course, it was very interesting also, but it was very tense because I saw my colleagues, as you said, were killed on a tank when the Northern Alliance was beginning to move, and they followed them, and they were caught in an ambush by the Taliban.
And the reader gets a sense that you could have been among them if you had just made a different decision from the one you made. If you hadn't gone back to base camp to write your article, if you had followed them, then you might have been in that group.
Yeah, I had a deadline, so I went back to a house we found to write my story. But of course, I'm always wondering whether if I didn't have this assignment, I would be, joining them on the tank, and what could have happened. But this question, when you deal with those sort of assignments, then it's a question you often ask yourself.
It turns out the deadline almost saved you. Well, in fact, it did save your life.
Yeah, that's why I become, very superstitious. Yes, about those deadlines. And when I have one, I stick.
You stick to the deadline.
Yeah,
now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about an encounter you had in Iraq. At the time, you went to Fallujah when it was extremely difficult to get there. This was at the beginning of the war, and you wanted to meet and interview a jihadist who had become notorious for kidnapping foreigners and killing them and posting the video of their beheadings on the internet. You went to meet him, and there was a moment there when you weren't sure whether or not you were going to become his next victim. Can you describe that for us?
Yes, he was the deputy of Zarqawi, who was the leader of Al-Qaeda at the time in Iraq. And I wanted to do an interview, but I knew also it was very dangerous, so I took a lot of I sat with a lot of sheikhs and had tea, and it took me weeks to arrange this meeting. And then finally the invitation came, and when it came, I was very anxious and I wanted to refuse it, and I said it's too dangerous, but then I was stuck with it because my driver and fixer arranged it for me, and everybody knew his family, where he lived, and he told me, if you're not going now, they're going to be very angry at us.
And that would have put him at risk.
Yeah, exactly. So we had to go.
So you had to go.
And yeah, we decided to go. And then eventually, after a few meetings, I was in the middle of Fallujah, no Westerners, no other Iraqis, and I was facing the person who was conducting the beheadings of the Westerners, and he described to me how he enjoyed it, and he wanted to show me one. So I after a while I didn't ask any question. He was doing the talking, and he was telling me, please ask me some more questions, and I didn't want to to know too much and to hear more. So, but he kept talking and describing.
Was it worth it taking that risk? I mean, in the end, everything went fine, but you were taking a risk by going.
It's always a question you ask yourself in those kind of assignments, and it's very difficult to assess, because then you go and in the interest of the story, so you have to decide whether all the time whether it's worthwhile. Sometimes you don't do stories and then you regret it. It's always a
And when you look back at that particular
guess.
event, was it worth it?
Well, I came back, so I guess it was.
With a good story.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, tell us about another event that you recount in the book. In 2008, Taliban in Afghanistan killed 10 French soldiers, and it was a huge story here in France. You went out you were in Pakistan, and you interviewed one of those Taliban commanders. You describe in your book that you really didn't think he would grant you the interview because it wasn't in their interest in many other ways. But in the end, giving the interview was a matter of pride for them.
Yes, because for them it was not good, so I didn't expect really that he was going to grant me the interview, because it was not good to disclose that they were located in Pakistan. It was a very big, issue, geopolitical issue, because it was going to reveal that the Pakistani are, harboring those people. But eventually he granted me the interview because he wanted to, in a previous interview in another magazine, one of his colleagues took, the advantage for the attack, and so he wanted to tell his truth and to put himself forward. So because of his vanity and his willingness to, to speak and to say who he was, I had this interview.
Again,
yes.
that got you a good story.
Yeah.
I was wondering as I read that, I thought, and the sense of pride, the vanity of this Taliban had got you a good story. And you had been able to exploit that situation to your advantage. I wonder if after so many years of covering extreme situations, seeing people in very unusual circumstances, war, when they're at risk, do you get a sense that you have developed a better understanding of mankind, of what people are made of what makes us tick? Do you think you understand people better as a result of your job?
I think so, yes. And because sometimes, you lose the idea that we and, for example, the Afghans are the same because we are so protected in our Western environment. But then I think it brings back a sense of a link, because you see that we could be drawn into those wars too, and so you understand more the motives and how you get there, and also the geopolitics and the perspective. Yes, the only thing I could not figure really deep is, the dark side, like when you're sitting next to someone who conducts beheading or...
That's still a mystery to you?
Yeah, it's still a mystery.
After 10 years of war reporting, the dark side of human beings is still something that you don't feel you understand.
Yes, and also maybe also the religiosity, the very, people who are really... into God, then this I cannot figure.
I was wondering, is there anything that you regret particularly? Is there a story you really would have liked to cover, an interview you would have loved to do and either failed to do or wasn't able to do for whatever reason? The one that got away. Is there a story that got away?
Telling you the truth, each time I regret. I regret not to stay longer. I regret not to go in depth. I regret, you always trying to do more and to do better. So each time, yes. The recent I really missed is Egypt. Between
Egypt, with the fall of Mubarak, the Egyptian revolution.
Yes, because between Tunisia and Libya, I was not, quick enough to cover also Egypt. So I missed this one.
You couldn't be everywhere.
No.
All right.
And still I have a chance because Egypt is far from finished.
Sarah Daniel, thank you very much. And thank you for watching the France 24 interview. And I strongly recommend this book, Sarah Daniel, Guerres Intimes. For the moment, it's only in French. It was published recently in March. Publishing house Flammarion makes for a fascinating read. Thank you for joining me on the France 24 interview. Stay tuned to France 24 for more news. Bye-bye.